Howdy folks, Dave here at Thunder Mesa Studio, where the main thing I want to show you today is how I bring 9-volt power to the lighting and the animated effects here on the On18 Bandit Canyon Railway layout. But before we jump into that, I've decided to add a second balancing rock over here on this side of the track. I like the way this one turned out so much that I thought, another one would really set the whole thing off. This is one of those instances where, more is more. I don't want to spend the entire episode on this because we covered most of this in the last video, but the balancing rock I'm going to do today is going to be animated a little bit differently than the one I did last time. Once again, I'm going to be using one of those slow geared 3 RPM DC motors, but this time it's going to be mounted under the layout with the shaft pointing straight up. And connected to the shaft is going to be a metal rod with a bend in it. The rock will fit down over the top of this metal rod, and as that bent rod rotates, the foam rock will seem to rock and sway back and forth. Now, I am straight up stealing this technique from the very talented Sam Toller, who used it to great effect in his ON30 Mine Train Through Nature's Wonderland layout. This layout is fantastic. If you haven't seen it, it recreates the Disneyland attraction in loving detail in 1/4-inch scale. There are some videos of it online. There's one of it here on this channel, I think, and I will link to it. You can also see it in person at Walt's Barn in Griffith Park, where it is on permanent display. And I think you can visit Walt's Barn if you happen to be in the LA area on the 3rd Sunday of every month. But you want to check with the Carrollwood Foundation website before you head out there, just to be sure. Now, for my rotating rod, this is actually a piece of Code 83 rail. And I put just a slight little bend in it. Might need to adjust that. That's probably too much. But this just has a really nice fit down inside of the drive shaft. But I'm going to pot that in there with a little bit of 5-minute epoxy. And as usual, I've got about 100 times more epoxy than I'm actually going to need. All right. Let that do its magic. I think we're going to want that shaft to come through right about here. I just want to solder some wires onto this before I install it. Now, unlike the other balancing rock, this one's actually going to be easier to do in situ, in place on the layout. So I'm going to go ahead and install the motor with the rod and everything under the layout right now, and then we'll build the balancing rock up on top of it. All right. And that is how that works. Now we carve some rocks. The base of the formation is not going to move, and that just needs to come up here to where this bend is, and that is 1 1/4 inches. This should fit down over this. That will be cemented in place, and then the upper part of the rock will be able to move freely on this rod. carved a couple more incidental rocks too, just to fill things in. Now I want to go ahead and get all of these painted before I install them over on the layout. So once again, just starting off with the scenic base color. Dry, I can install these. There's a little Loctite power grab here. Made a couple of small changes on the piece of rail coming up here, the actuator, the rod, whatever you want to call it. I bent it into more of an S shape, very subtle S shape. Then I covered it with a piece of shrink wrap tubing and painted that the scenic base color. So if any part of it happens to show, it'll kind of just blend in. I also cut this rock into, so it's 3 pieces. You got the base, the centerpiece, and then the top. Because I was going back and looking at Sam Toller's version of this balancing rocks, and that's what he did, and that was very effective. So it just kind of sways back and forth. And there is our little balancing rock garden. Let's see how it looks with the power hooked up. And speaking of hooking up power, that is exactly what I want to show you next, the different components and methods I use for bringing DC power to the lighting and accessories on a layout like this. The first thing we're going to need is a AC-DC 9-volt adapter or transformer. It's going to transform your house current down to a usable 9 volts of DC for the lighting and accessories on the layout. This one's actually for a guitar pedal, but it should work just fine for our needs. I picked these up on Amazon, and I'll put a link down below. They're pretty inexpensive. This is all there is to it. Sometimes these are called a wall wart. And I like this particular kind because it's low profile. If you're using a power strip, you know, it doesn't take up the entire power strip like some of these big transformers do. It just plugs right in just like that. And here you can see the specs are always printed right on these things. Input 100 to, what does that say, 240 volts. AC output 9 volts DC. So this will work just fine. And the other component we're going to use is this power distribution bus. You can see you put the input power comes in here, and then you've got all of these terminals to hook up your different lighting and accessories to. Just need a screwdriver to hook those up. Real quick and easy. This one is actually labeled specifically for model railroads. And I also picked this up on Amazon, but you know, it doesn't have to say model trains on it for you to be able to use it. Now you can see this DC transformer has a plug on there, but this does not have a socket. So the first thing we have to do is just snip this right off. Not going to need that. And then we'll split these wires. Like so. And we want to reveal just a little bit of insulation down at the end. A little more. There we go. Now I want to keep track of the polarity when I hook this up, which is positive and which is negative. And I believe the solid wire is going to be positive. And you can see I've just trimmed off enough of the insulation just to fit inside this terminal. You really don't want to trim off any more than that. And that's to prevent any kind of short circuit happening. So we're going to call A positive and B negative. Okay. Now plug that in. And before we hook it up on the layout, we can test it out. I've got a LED here that's all ready to go. You want to keep track of the polarity, of course, for a couple of reasons. One, it affects, if you're using small DC motors, it affects which way they rotate, you know, forward or reverse, whatever you want to call it. And on LEDs, they actually won't function if they're wired up backwards. The positive needs to be to the positive and the negative needs to be the negative, or they just won't work. The current won't flow through them. As you can see, we've got a green light, so we've got that hooked up properly. Good to go. Now, some of you may be asking, you know, why go to all this trouble? Why not just use the accessories output on a DC power pack? Well, because the accessories output is actually putting out 16 volts AC, and that's a much higher voltage than what you need for these simple lighting and animation effects. You know, I usually do it 9 to 12 volts DC, 12 volts at the most. So this will actually burn out your components because it's too much. The voltage is too high. Unless you have some sort of step-down regulator in between this and your lighting effects, in which case you might as well go ahead and put in a 9-volt transformer just like I'm doing. I want to mount this where I can easily access it. So I think we'll put it right here. And that way I can have just a little removable bit of rock work here in the scenery where I can get to it. This unit is nice because it comes with these, with the mounting screws and nylon bushings included. They don't always include those. And you want those bushings because anytime you're mounting any sort of electronics like this, you want to keep a little bit of airspace behind it. I mean, this thing isn't going to generate hardly any heat at all, but you know, still, it's just a good practice. All right, now I can start hooking up all of my lighting and my accessories. Now, since the scenery is actually going to go all the way down, this is the bottom of the canyon right here. I want to drill a couple of holes in these support cross pieces to run the wiring through from anything that's over on this side of the canyon. That way, once all the scenery is in place and everything, I'll still be able to access this wiring from the bottom if I need to. Now I've wired the two motors together for the balancing rocks, and we'll hook those up first. One thing I always like to do when hooking stuff up like this is to label it. So I've got some white drafting tape. I'm just going to write balancing rocks. Don't worry, I can read it even if you can't. It's my chicken scratch. So that if I ever need to troubleshoot, I can be able to find the wires quickly. Next, we'll hook up the blackjack mine. Well, I want to hook up Edda's place next because I've got some lighting in there. But before I do, I want to add a light to the interior of the hole-in-the-wall depot and wire those together. So these structures here will be on, one set of wires, just simplifies things. So first thing I need to do, this is going to be a pretty simple installation. Just need to drill a hole. And I've got a yellow flickering LED. I'm just going to sit right down in there like that. And this structure, since it's open on the bottom, you just put it right over the top like that. So that gets connected to that. And this gets connected to this. So now I only need to attach one set of leads to go down through these holes I drilled a minute ago that take the wires into the bottom of the canyon. Now with all that wiring done, I want to bring power to the entire layout. And for that, I'm just going to use one of these power strips from my local hardware store. And the thing I like about these is it's got an on-off right there, so that can act as a master power switch for the entire layout. And I'm just going to mount this right here to this upright. This has got slotted holes for mounting screws on the back. So I'm going to use the old masking tape trick. Make sure these line up. Piece of masking tape over the back of this, like so. Then I can just mark where the holes are. Pull this off of here. Let's stick it on where we want to mount it. And that shows me exactly where I need to drill my holes. I can plug in my PWM throttle and the 9-volt transformer that we just added. I've got 4 plugs left over. I'll just use a zip tie to keep these wires neat and tidy. Take up all that slack. This will all be tucked up underneath the layout. Now I just need to plug in the power strip and turn everything on. I should be able to just reach up under here and flick on the main power. It all works. Let's check it out in night mode so you can see the lighting effects. how I bring power to the lights and accessories here on the Bandit Canyon Railway layout. Thanks so much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please like, subscribe, share, and hit that notification bell if you'd like to see more. You can also follow Thunder Mesa over on Instagram at thunder.mesa and see all that's new on the Thunder Mesa Studio website at thundermesa.studio. Of course, if you really like what we're doing here at the channel and want to show your support, you can do it these nice folks did and head on over to patreon.com/thundermesa and show your support there. Until next time, keep moving forward, my friends, and adios for now.